Thanks, Susan Henderson.
Question I had, I talked about it before, which was related to fusing of pipes. Have you made any determination if you're going to fuse the piping, or are you just going to use a coupler system?
The fusing is, it's used on HDPE pipe, but that's generally a different type of pipe. That's a thick wall pipe that may be used for gas or gas mains or long water mains, or where it's being bored under a creek or something. They'll go to a thicker wall pipe and they will just take the two ends of the pipe and butt them up against each other and fuse them together. This will be more of a slip joint pipe like you would have on a water or sewer pipe, where you have a bell section and then the pipe just slips into it, and there's a gasket in there that gives you pretty much a watertight seal there, so that you don't have, we're going to have holes in there that will have infiltration going back and forth, but we won't be having that infiltration taking place at the pipe joints.
And I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of preventative maintenance as far as any kind of separation between sections of pipes. You know what I mean? Like, you know, if there's any kind of construction equipment that drives over those pipes and it keeps on flexing, over time, it has a tendency of actually separating, you know, where the joints are. So that's where I just raised that as a discussion point.
The pipe, this is, the HDPE is considered a flexible pipe, so it does have some bend in it.
Right.
And the real structural strength and rigidity is that you're putting it into a gravel trench. And so when you put that round pipe into that trench and then you put weight on it from the top, part of the rigidity of the pipe is where it kind of shrinks down a little bit. And as it shrinks down, it pushes against that gravel on the side, and that gravel on the side. Talk about this, but I imagine as we get into final design, that we'll also have one of those drop inlets in here in the middle of Hester Woods, and depending on how everything works out as we finally design it, that drop inlet will probably be several inches lower than any of these other drop inlets. It will be down, and it'll be at a grade such that as we get those big rainstorms and the water begins to build up, it can flow from these areas, and the first place that it could come out of the ground would be in Hester Woods, because that's a lower, the grade there is lower, so we can actually use Hester Woods as a storage basin, so that begins to pond first before it ponds anywhere else. And you know, it's kind of difficult to see, to think about, but pretty much water sinks, you know, finds its own level. So as you have water build up over the whole area, it's going to come out of the ground and fill into that Hester Park area first. And that would also be the last place that it would get pumped fully dry. So again, we use whatever we can to provide storage capacity. Yes, sir.
Is there a consideration for a pond on Hester Woods? Any kind of way? A retention pond?
Well,
No.
No, I understand that. I can appreciate that. I've got one beside me I'd like to rent to somebody.
well, in essence, what we're trying to do by lowering the groundwater table is that we're creating a great big pond throughout the whole area. And so that instead of that as groundwater builds up, if we can drain that down, then all of that space, the void space, which it's gonna, there's 30 or 40% void space in that soil that can be used to store the groundwater table. Now, if you dig a pond in Hester Woods, the water in that pond is still going to be the same as the groundwater table.
That water in that pond would not be on top of the groundwater, on top of the street, and it wouldn't get on top of sewer system, and it wouldn't stink to high heaven for 2.5 weeks while it takes the pumps to pump it over into the golf course to get it out of here. That should be our goal right there. I'm sorry, I can agree with everything you've said so far, but the one thing that sticks in my mind, Mr. Kramer, do you remember the first time I talked to you? I said, don't. The first thing, the most important thing about this water is do not wait until the water is on the roads to pump. My second statement to you was, do no harm. How many spots have a problem with groundwater literally standing on or in the grass? How many have you counted them? Do you know how many are there? Do you know where they are? My question to you today is, why would we want to run a 1,500 foot pipe in the ground? This is do no harm. When we could put the pipes exactly where they need to be. And it's not all over the place. Everybody's yard that you'll be cutting up doesn't have groundwater problems, but you're going to cut it up. You can punch under the road with small pipe, tie them all together with those small pipes. And by the way, that pond, I know you don't like it, but I'm sorry. A 1/4 acre pond sitting on Hester Woods, a 1/4 acre pond, 7 foot deep, will hold 50 plus times that pipe at any given time. I asked you about the recharge time. The recharge time is all the time. It's going, because when that water gets up on Hester Woods, in the groundwater area, and on Oak Leaf Road, and on Yopon, and all of them, when it gets up there, and like I said, on septic systems, when it gets up there, it becomes pressure to hold the groundwater where it is. I can understand and I can appreciate a lot of this stuff right there, but I'm telling you, what we need is 3 ponds, one on Hester Wood. Make Gary's a pond, give him a backyard, not a sinking foundation, for God's sakes. Fix everything in town in one fell swoop. We can do it in phase 3 if you want to, and I'll be glad to help you build it, and I will actually dig these ponds for you. If you'll rent a machine, hold on a minute now, please give me my time. I thought about this, and I came up with the idea. I've walked the property, and I don't mean to be ugly, I'm not trying to insult anyone, but how many in here have walked the property when it's flooded? How many knows what the flood actually, I know, I walked in it, in that 12 inches of sewer water, to clean up my yard more than one time. I came here in 2000, bought the property in 94, and I saw the problem soon after that. So I knew where to build my house. I knew what to do. Now, I have a problem with my concrete collapsing a little bit, simply because the mud pit. Now, that was a creek bed, and that will never dry. It never gets dry. The only way it gets dry is a terrible drought, because it's mud, black mud. That's not sand, but that's where the water stays. And the water that comes down all these roads into the bowl at the bottom is running right down that road and sliding off to the edge and rolling into the grass. What we need to do is come up with a system where we, Sonny and all of us, come up with a system where we can control the water, send it where we want it to go, which would be a retaining pond. I know one time you told me that retaining ponds aren't clean. The Bermuda Greens, isn't that a retaining pond? And the golf course ponds, isn't that a retaining pond? And we're pumping it into the sound. Why can't we pump ours? And I told you that we needed to go somewhere else. We need to go to that little basin have you walked the property? Have you?
Yep.
Okay. All right. All of it.
Mm-hmm.
Not during storm.
Yep.
Did you walk it during storms?
I have been through there when it's flooded, yes.
Well, let me ask you this. Why didn't anyone come and talk to me or Mr. Larkin here? Because Gary, people that seen this, why didn't anyone ask us? Why didn't somebody come and walk up to our house and ask us, what do you know about this water problem? Nobody did. I haven't talked to a single soul until I got a little bit angry, because I'm getting tired. We come back after Florence, me and my wife, and sat on the front porch, absolutely beautiful night. Air was perfectly clean as it is after a storm. Beautiful, full moon. An old camping stove. And Sue, she turned on the radio, and I played my harmonica, and it felt good to be home. And the next morning, it stunk. I'm sorry, it stinks, and it's wrong. It's not good, and we don't need to let that water get on that road. I'm sorry again. I'm going to insult somebody, and I am terribly sorry about this. But it broke my heart to see those signs on the side of the road. High water. That breaks my heart. That shows me the confidence of this project is shot in the beginning. And I really thank you for buying them, though, because when and if you do take up this pond, and by the way, you can actually hook these 3 ponds together, put a pump at one end, and once you start that pump and get the water flowing, you can cut that pump off. You can bypass that pump, and it will siphon every bit of that water that falls into that pond, as long as it stays on top of the pipe in the water. As long as the water stays on top of that pipe. It's so simple. We got to go with simple ideas, guys. We don't need it. This is an overkill. I'm sorry. It's an overkill. Like I asked, has anyone checked how many true bad spots do we have of groundwater? I remember groundwater when I was a kid. I always got my tennis shoes wet, and I couldn't figure out why. Well, I put a pool in my house in Newport after I got married and had kids. And I saw exactly what my dad said. It's a hard pan. And it was just layers of black bowls, if you would. Just layers of black dirt that kept the water from going down to, eventually it evaporates, or it does make its way out of that bowl with a little bit more, and it goes down. As a matter of fact, we've been pumping groundwater. When you're pumping groundwater, that's what we drink, what we take our showers in. And by the way, this may sound a little bad, but it's life. It goes long ways down there and it gets filtered. And if you disturb that filtering action, then we might get some bad water one day. Anyhow, like I said, if we were to go to that side, right back of my house when they put the 18th green there, what is it, T? I don't even know how to buy golf. I live right back to the golf course and I don't know anything about it. I'm gonna have to watch them someday and learn something. But if you would put a pump station there and tie all these, put 3 ponds, tie them all together with pipes, small pipes. Put your black pipe where it needs to be on, and tie it together with small pipes. Hook it all to a pumping system so that they can go out there and switch a valve, and boom, it's done. They go from natural flow to pump flow.
Okay.
There's simple ways to do this, and we have not got a simple way right here. And my goal, my plea is, for God's sakes, get the water off the road. Don't let it build up. Fix it so it don't get caught on the... They're bowls. They were given to us. Okay? Man messed this mess up. Man needs to fix it. And it's time somebody does something that makes some sense. I'm sorry. I'm going to leave before I really lose it.
Well, let me kind of explain to you. You're talking about, you've got a bowl here, and a bowl down in here, and a bowl down in here, and you want to tie those together with pipe.
Yes.
And take it to a pump station.
Yes.
And if you tied it together with a pipe, it would look something like this pipe that we've got shown going from
I understand that,
area
but I'm saying
and
red
down
line.
to the pump station, which is going to pump that water up to the golf course.
Do me a favor, if you will. Find some time and call me, and let's walk this property again. I'm not saying that your plan is not right. I'm just saying we need to deal with more than just groundwater. Like I said, when I saw my tennis shoes got wet, I found out what groundwater was. And this may sound silly, I've said it to a lot of people, but I'm gonna say it to you too, and see if everybody understands it. A bathtub won't hold water if it don't have sides. It's a wet floor, okay? So these bowls are natural ponds. We need to make ponds inside of the pond, so then, like I said, we can control it, clean it, make it go where we want it to go, in those ponds. And we'll have a nice pond. Put a fountain in it to aerate it. Keep it pure. Put filters if you have to. And even, like I said, use nature to do some of it. Oh God, I've said way too much. I'm sorry. I apologize to all. Good day.
So Don's been here for a while, and we met with him out in the street. I don't want to be dismissive of anything he's saying, but I tried to convince him that I think we're kind of saying the same thing. We're just talking the routing, okay? He essentially wants us to go from pond to pond to pond and route it out behind his house to the golf course. As Larry was starting to say, I think the system is doing that, but the reason he wants us to dig out a retention pond on Hester Woods, okay? That was his main thing. He told Clark and I out there the other day. I wish you were still here to hear this, because if you've been out there, you've seen Sonny during Florence put big white PVC pipes into the ground, and he was sucking water out of the water table there. Well, in Durian, when we made the decision, okay, start preemptive pumping, I went down there, I didn't see the pump in Hester Woods. He had it up in Winfrey's pond. Instead of here, we had it up in the pond here. And I said, Sonny, why are you doing this? And he said, because this is the deepest spot in that area. I can't remember the depth you said of the Winfrey pond, but what I told Diana the other day, and I'd say this if he was here, we have a detention pond right in this area, right here, and that's right behind Ed Winfrey's. And if we have a way to pull risers and suck down that pond, if we have a way to pull risers and suck down the Watkins pond, which is right here, and if we have a way to pull out risers, and there's Donnie's house right there, he wants this discharge to be right here. Out there, and it's because, if you remember from my brief last year, Myrtle Court is where the first water starts to appear during flooding. That's the lowest spot. If you remember from last year, that area from Myrtle through Reefton all the way to Hampton Inn, I showed you that old 1950s topo. It's just the absolute lowest spot in there. Sir?
Yeah, when you say polarizers on the ponds, will it be, will the groundwater in those ponds be going through the pipes, or will it be stopped and then you pull the risers?
Well, what we, in here, I don't know whether you can see it from where you are, but there are slots on either side and board on either side here. And boards fit into those slots, okay? And then they're stacked on top of each other. And so you can use those boards to set the water level of the pond. Here you can see the boards up here, the pond is slightly lower, but they set the boards at this elevation to set the elevation of the pond. Now, when we put these in to where those three ponds are, we're gonna have those boards, and we can kind of control those water levels during normal periods to where, you know, the homeowners in the town want that water level to be, to kind of maintain those ponds. Now, that water level, and I'm not sure that he quite understood this, but basically the whole town has got a lake under it. And that's the groundwater table. And that lake rises and falls. It's subject to somewhat the tidal action. Is subject to rainfall, but that lake rises and falls. So those, the water level in those ponds is based that, if you want to know where your groundwater table is, then that's where the groundwater table is where the level of that lake is. So we can set the boards so that water can rise up, and if it exceeds the level of those boards, it would flow over and into the pipe, and get carried off. All right. Now, if you get in coming up into what really appears to be a very large storm event, then you can start pulling a few more boards out. And instead of Sonny having to go and pump those ponds down, he only has to set up his pump down here at Myrtle Court, and each of those ponds will drain into that pipe system and can be piped out from that one area. And so you've got a lot of control there, both with how you pump the groundwater and when he starts to use his large pumps to pump out the areas. When you start pulling boards out of these ponds, you've got a lot of control there that doesn't require him to have pumps, at each of these ponds trying to keep everything dry.
So the upstream end of those lines all start at ponds?
We've
Upgrading.
got a pond here that will have that control structure, a pond here that will have that control structure, and a pond here that will have that control structure. This is just the low spot in Willow here is what we're doing there, and so that's just.
And the other thing, if Donnie was still here, I would tell him, is I beg to differ. That line runs through some of the worst affected area in town. Now I know it's more than that, but that line is exactly where the worst flooding is. Mrs. Cantor's yard is the first one to flood, okay? Hester Woods starts to fill and the butts were flooded. Joe McAllister's place on down to Mr. Crace were all flooded. The reeds are underwater with their trampoline, and the orange, or correction, the yellow house with the blue roof is flooded, and Mr. Kavanaugh can't get to his house if a bird pisses. So the line, it begs to differ with Donnie. That line is going through not only some of the worst affected, but the first affected.
By ponds, for clarification, by ponds that you're referring to, and the Winfrey and if we went out there right now, there's water sitting.
Yeah, the Winfrey Pond and the Watkins ponds are no kidding ponds. The Dickinson Pond is more of a swamp.
Sure.
But it is the lowest, it's almost always wet there.
Yeah.
Could you briefly just address, like, where those pipes are going to cut through and they're adjacent to property lines, how those are going to affect, if at all, the primary and secondary drain fields of the property septic?
Well, Bree, I think, has gone through and pulled septic tank permits, and so I think that where we're looking at is going to meet the separation distance required by the state for the distance between the pipe and the septic tank. The biggest impact it can be is when we get into, and this would not necessarily be a storm event, but within those vaults and the pumps, the groundwater pumps that we have in that vault, they can be set on flow controls as well as manually operated. So we could set those on float controls so that they would start pumping when the groundwater hits a certain elevation. And so we can play with that. Sonny and I can, and Bree and I will all have fun over the next 5 years or so. We can play with those elevations such that if the groundwater is getting up and it's getting up to an area where it would impair how the septic tanks function, right now you've got nothing to do. Well, we can just turn those pumps on for the groundwater and just begin to lower that groundwater table. And that would, not just for storage for a storm, but if we have a year like we did, not this year, but last year, where we had 100 inches of rain and that groundwater table came up everywhere, then we could be running those groundwater pumps, pull that groundwater table down, and your septic tanks would function much better.
Bree, how close can that pipe be to someone's septic tank?
Well, right now, everyone has over a 20-foot offset from their property lines. So we're going right on the property lines, the location we have.
Yeah.
So, when we lose power, this system would allow us to still just use the 2 pumps in Magnolia and down at the golf course, right? So we'll be in good shape because it'll flow with that elevation.
It'll flow there, and then Sonny, these will be electric pumps. They'll have a plug there that we can plug a generator into them.
Okay.
But those, so we would be able to operate those low flow pumps, and then the engine driven pumps or gasoline pumps. And so, this would be set up so that it could function when the power is out. Yes, sir.
I got a couple of questions. I'm a retired maintenance foreman for a chemical company in Philadelphia and Bristol.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you have a lot of T's and Y's, is that a heavier gauge? Because
No.
that's the first place that wears.
Okay, we will, there will be a 2x2 concrete box. That will be the inlet structure. That will be located at all the bends, so that a pipe would come into the side of that structure, and then it would come out. And there will be a grate on top.
Just
So
like a
that
septic
grate,
system.
yeah, the grate allows you to, not only for the water to flow in, but you lift the grate out, and then Sonny can squeeze down in that little 2x2 box and jet those pipes out if he needs to. But basically, you would have these boxes at every bend, and then a straight run of pipe.
Okay, and the other thing, when they put in that pipe on Oak Leaf Drive, that was a loser right from the beginning, and they were told that. It was 800 feet, and it dropped 16 inches, which is impossible for it to go down it. I called up engineers that I work with, that were neighbors and all that, and sent them a sketch. And they told me right up, it's going to fail. Well, the first time we had a storm, it didn't work. That's when Sonny had to bring in the first pump. That pump's been there since day one. Every time you get it, you pump it out. So now you're going to pump this all the way through the town, which doesn't make sense to me, because what we do now, we take all the water from the Hampton Inn all the way down past Myrtle Creek through ponds to pump it uphill to the country club, to pump it a mile back, to pump it out. I mean, good grief.
Well, we're trying to do the best we can, it's feasible. Those ponds, the reason that we're coming off of Myrtle Court and we're pumping into the pond, and then we're pumping out of the other end of the pond out to the sound, and that pump will be a large pump. It will pump 3 to 4 times what one of Sonny's engine-driven pumps. It will move water out of those ponds, and it will provide the pressure to get it through that outfall pipe out to the infiltration basin out of the sound. That's one reason we're using a pump there. But like going to Myrtle Court into the pond, that pond system then becomes a very large pipe, because it will carry, without having to lay pipe, you can pump into the pond at one end, and it will over time flow out the other end. And so we're looking at trying to move and pump water as little as possible, but make sure that we do it as efficiently as we can. Yes, sir.
What's you say a large pump, right? What's the operating cost on an ongoing basis? What's the maintenance cost
Well,
of this?
the only time that you would really have to operate that pump is during
Emergency situation.
during hurricane. So other than that, it's not going to be sitting there burning energy. And we're looking at, in fact, we've got a fellow that's kind of an expert in these pumping systems that we're working with on another project in Hyde County, where they pump tens of thousands of acres down in the spring, so that they can plant that ground, and then it builds up. So those pumps are operating on an irregular basis. We're going to use the same type of pump here. It's a screwed screw-driven pump, and so that it doesn't have to run all the time. It will not run except on very rare occasions. And the groundwater pump would really, going up into the ponds, that would depend really on what your rainfall events are. It's not expected that would run 24/7. That most of the year, your groundwater would fluctuate just as it is now. It would only be if you got a lot of rain and had to pull the groundwater table down, or you had a big storm coming and you had to pull the groundwater down and be ready to pump a lot of surface water.
Can you describe again, you said some kind of cover where the inlet boxes are, you're gonna get debris in there, and your perforated pipe is gonna open into those inlet boxes and it's gonna pick up that debris. But then you described a cover that you were looking at?
Well, you see the grate on there.
Right.
That's gonna capture a lot of leaves and debris, but it won't capture everything. And so what will be inside of those boxes, most likely, and we're still working, kind of through these details, but most likely will be a cover that fits over the end of the pipe.
Where it comes into the box.
Where it comes into the box. And it would have smaller slots on it. At the bottom, it would be a plastic cover that came up, and it would have smaller holes at the bottom, which would catch smaller debris. And if those begin to plug up and the water level tends to rise, then it would have larger slots and larger slots and larger slots. So the idea is, hopefully those small holes don't plug and you capture all of your small debris, but you still have larger openings as you go up so that it can let more water through and you don't end up plugging it. And even if you plugged it, you pull the grate off and you pull that back. I'll put the willow tree in, and the willow trees, weeping willows and stuff, are notorious. Within a year or two, if you plant one 10 feet away from that pipe, within a year or two, those roots are gonna plug that pipe up completely. I've seen it to where it's just a solid mass of roots inside an 18-inch pipe. But yeah, under normal circumstances,
there's a lot of willow trees of some variety in the Watkins Pond.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't.
I don't think the pipe's going to be right on that side,
Right.
but all through the whole system that you've got going on, has that been addressed?
We
as to how to
haven't
fix it?
really seen an issue, and we don't normally have an issue unless a willow tree is planted or something. And the willow trees are the worst. I can't ever envision, but we can send a rotor-rooter down through that pipe if we need to and cut those roots out. But typically, that's not a big issue as long as.
Do annual maintenance help all it too?
Yeah, yes ma'am.
I live at one of the lowest points on Cedar Road, and we get flooding all the time. And so my first question is with your proposal, do you see your proposal having any positive impact on the flooding that we experience? Or if it does not have any impact, years ago, they went around and installed grates, dug a big hole, but didn't funnel the water anywhere. So if your proposal is not going to help Cedar, since some of those grates are already there, would you consider hooking on to those grates, basically hooking the pipe to them, to your pipes you're proposing? Or if you're not willing to do that, how much longer is the people on Cedar Road going to have to wait for a solution?
I'll address that partially. First question is, response to your first question is, I unquestionably, based off of what I've seen, think if we address the first and most heavily impacted areas, which is laurel, myrtle, juniper, yellow and willow, it'll have a positive impact on cedar and holly, because it's that same bowl rising up, man. And cedar and holly have been impacted in my 12 years here, heavily impacted, street flooding twice. We have to get hammered for Cedar and Holly, and we did twice.
All we have to have is a huge rain, and the water will be raging across my driveway into my garage. We don't have to have a hurricane.
Well, there are issues of the way driveways are lined up. I'm talking neighborhood flooding of covered roadways and multiple homes. Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of driveway nightmares in different areas of this town, or landscaping issues. But I think, I know the water table, I've heard enough experts, the water table is one big dome in the eastern area of town. I think it's gonna have a positive impact on Cedar and Holly. As far as your second part, Larry mentioned before, and we've talked about phase 3 someday, expanding this line to potentially be expanded west to Cedar and Holly. Short answer is yes, if the capacity would take it, and I think it will.
So why didn't you develop a solution that's gonna solve all of the tree streets areas? Why are you doing a Band-Aid project and not doing a whole complete project?
Well, I don't believe it's a Band-Aid project because I believe we're impacting the water table area in the most critical and best spot to do it, which is Yule Pond, Willow, and Juniper. I think it's going to help you. I do.
Yes, sir.
I have two questions. First question is dealing with elevation, the western elevation of where the flow to the tank on Myrtle is going, okay? And I heard you're going to dig down 6 feet and run the pipe to Myrtle Court. Okay?
Right.
And
Well, we'll dig down eight distance. Bree is
Okay.
working on that now, but there is slope in that pipe to carry it. And, becomes complicated. But,
so the ground elevation level at the west end is how many feet above sea level?
It's like 6.
6. And at Myrtle Court, where the containment tank is, that elevation
About
is?
4.5, 4.
Okay.
So we have to be able to be under the very lowest, but also
Yes.
under at the end,
Yeah.
the beginning or end.
Yeah.
So it's a game of trying to play, make sure we're not constantly sucking in the whole of them.
So the depth of the tank in Myrtle Court goes down how deep?
-2 elevation, I believe.
-2.
Yeah, it's enclosed, so.
And you typically, when you have submersible pumps like that, you would maintain about a 2-foot elevation in there. So from about elevation 0, mean sea level, on up to where the top of the tank is at about 8, 6?
The top of the tank?
Yeah.
No, it's at 4.5. It's like level with the ground. Pretty much.
You've got that much storage in there, and you've got that much area that you can play with for controlling the groundwater cable. So you can either operate the pumps so that it takes it all the way down. If there's a lot of flow, you can take the water, you can pump that all the way down to 0, or you can take it so that it maintains above that level.
Okay, so there's going to be an 18-inch pipe going into that hole.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So what is the anticipated volume flow in those 3 scenarios that we had talked about? So I'm trying to figure out how much is going into the tank, and what's the capacity of getting it out of the tank
Okay.
as it exists?
And that's a good question. And if we knew how much it was going to rain and how deep the water would get, then we could have an idea. 40 years ago, if you told me we would have a 10-inch rainstorm in eastern North Carolina, I told you were crazy. Now a 10-inch rainstorm, that's, you know, it's a good word rain, but that's not that big a deal. We get an 18-inch rainfall. Texas gets a 52-inch rainfall. You know, we don't really know what the volume's gonna be. What we did in looking at that the 18-inch pipe is, how big do we need to make that pipe so that it can carry all of the water down to that pump station that Sunny can pump out of that pump station up to the ponds. And right now, we've got an 18-inch pipe coming in, and you've got what, 4-inch, 6-inch pipes?
We make it into a 6.
Yeah, he's got a 6-inch pump, which of course can pump a little bit more capacity than a gravity 6-inch line. But we can get all of the water from those areas down to where he can pump it. And the limiting capacity is gonna be the pumps. Always, you know, we can get far more water down to the bottom than we can pump out. And more, we sized it so that we could get substantially more down there if we need to, in case in the future we decide we want to do something else with the pumps and put in larger capacity pumps down there to pump it out. So it's the 18 inches is plenty of capacity to get that water down to the pump station.
How about getting it out?
What I think is the volume you're bringing in is going to far exceed the capacity to get it out, which is going to cause the bubble up and the overflow that we experience currently.
Well, trying to think, what you basically have is a great big bathtub there. The whole area is a bathtub. Now, part of that water surface is below ground, part of it's above grade. But you know what? If you took sand piles and you put them in the bathtub and go up and down, parts of your sand would be above the water level and part would be below, but you'd still have that bathtub level. Okay, and if you go down to your drain and you open that drain up, then everything kind of pulls down. And so it doesn't mean that water piles up on top of the drain. It's not going to do that. It's still going to be at that level, and it's going to pretty much drop uniformly with that 18-inch pipe. So it's got the capacity to flow down, but it's only going to flow downhill as fast as he can pump.
It's going uphill.
But
It goes uphill once it goes out of it goes
The
uphill.
containment vault has a certain volume that it's capable of holding.
right, but that's just where the pump is, you know, but your big bathtub is going to fall at the rate that Sunny can pump it out. It doesn't all flow down that 18-inch pipe and then pile up in a big pile up there. It stays pretty much level over the whole thing. So as he begins pumping, everything drops
At exactly the same rate.
at pretty much exactly the same rate.
So even though there's an 18-inch pipe flowing in and a 6-inch flowing out, the capacity of that pump is going to be significantly strong enough
Well,
to enable that volume to continue to come in.
well, it's going to be
Still maintaining a
it's gonna
level
be-
below overflow.
The pumps are going to be the controlling capacity. So if we just got those little groundwater pumps running, then we're going to pump at 100, 200 gallons a minute. If he brings his engine-driven pumps in, then we're going to be running 400 or 500 gallons a minute. And that's what's going to be pumping out.
Okay, 400 or 500 gallons a minute out.
I think that's
I
probably
would
what
say
it is.
8 to 1,000, but
Okay, yeah,
there's only one thing we need to do, I think, just like what we did all this time pumping. The discharge going out to the pond, it's a 4-inch now, we need to go to a 6. That's easy to fix by tying into the main. I'll tell you later, but I'm gonna tell you right now.
Well, we can put that
That's what we're
in. Yeah, so,
That's what we're asking. So you're gonna put a larger pipe in? where it's pumping out
Larger
now.
pump and a larger hose.
Yeah, if we need to increase the size of that force main going out.
The reason they're
Yeah.
asking, that pipe goes through their yard.
Okay,
Well, I want to speak to mitigation, which I said at the very beginning of this. Mr. Kavanaugh, I'm not pretending for a minute that area around the vault and around Bowens and the west side of your driveway, this will keep that dry. But if we're managing that water table in the weeks prior to that storm event and drawing that down, then the period of time that the Everharts need to use their John boat to get to your house is going to be less. I mean, that's the whole idea here with mitigation. I mean, I don't think this 18-inch pipe coming in is going to be any worse than the 3 feet of water going in the 2-foot wide grate that happened for 2 weeks, you know?
No pipe coming in, no pipe coming in.
It's the pipe going out.
You got goes into and comes out.
I understand.
Okay?
Yeah,
I want
anything
to
we
make
can-
sure that
anything-
we have the capacity to goes out of
Understand.
for the volume that is going into.
well, it's, and, the capacity that we'll be able to pump out is, when it says pump, is the same that we've had all along. The only thing is, we're gonna make it easier for that water to get from those 3 bowls to the pump station. But it's still not gonna get out any faster than he can pump it, and it's not gonna come in any faster than he can pump it. You know, that bathtub is gonna draw down as he pumps. And so that's not gonna really have any impact on you, because you don't have all this water. You don't have 1,000 gallons a minute rushing in that pipe and only 500 gallons a minute pumping out. You've got the ability, if he had 10,000 gallons a minute pump, you've got the capacity for that water to come in. But if he's only got 1,000 gallons a minute pump, that's all that's going to be flowing down that pipe to your lot. So it's not going to make things worse. It ought to make, the key here is, if we said that it would solve all the drainage problems in that east end, that would be daring Mother Nature. And she would love nothing more than to prove us wrong. So these rainfall events are going to happen. They're going to be varying in intensity and capacity. This will undoubtedly, it will make the situation better. It will take it longer to begin to where it begins to pond in the street, and it'll make it much shorter duration that we'll be able to pump those streets down to get the water level out, but there will probably still be some ponding in those streets. Yes, sir.
The water level at Marble Court now is 4.5 feet. With the submersible pump, once that gets put in, is the plan to maintain it at 4.5 feet like it is now, or will it be just automatically drawn down to some lower level?
Well, if you turn the pump on and you're using electricity, and then you're paying the power company. So if at that 4.5 feet where it is now, if the water level is where it is now, and we don't need to pump the groundwater down, then my recommendation would be, let's just let things go as they've been going. But when that water level rises up, either that it becomes an issue with septic tanks, or we're going to get a lot of rainfall, or expecting a big rain event, and we need to draw that groundwater down, that's when you really ought to be turning those pumps on to start lowering things down.
So
But
is
Who
there,
will make that decision on doing, when to turn the pumps on?
at what groundwater level are we going to try to maintain?
That's
Well-
what we're still talking.
Yeah, that's something that we've got, the levels, there are float switches in there, and so you can infinitely adjust those float levels in there. So we can start out, we can try it at one level, and if that seems to be working good, we leave it there. If we say no, the groundwater table is too high, we need to bump it up, we can leave it up there so that the pumps automatically cut up on at that level. But if the storm comes, he can go to the control panel, and switch the automatic switch to manual and just cut the pumps on so that it runs to draw that level on down. So
My goal is Sonny and I work together with the golf course on preemptive pumping. And that's kind of an art because we need to deal with shellfish sanitation and such. Because preemptive pumping right now involves discharging to the sound. Preemptive pumping in the future is going to be using those smaller pumps and just going to that sand trap. My hope is that that pipe is as low as possible, and the elevation is as low as it's impacting as much of the water table as possible. And I think there'll be some experimentation for a year or two. We'll be looking at those water table measurements we're taking right now at Myrtle and at Hester Woods. I'm going to jump to a different subject before too many people leave. But we'll answer all our questions. I think we're going to be looking at those water table levels, and I want to pump as early as possible and as often as possible to the degree that that infiltration sand trap will accept groundwater. There's no reason not to, except an electric bill.
And we have the data from those two groundwater levels. That's what I'm looking at to try and look at the fluctuation.
Is there an explanation for the difference in the groundwater levels at Myrtle and Hester Woods?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, probably because they have the amateurs doing it, which is Sonny and I and Howard. You know, those things were put in. They're good monitors, but when these guys are doing it, I think they're going to be calibrated a little better to sea level and such. I mean, we have a baseline. We know what we've been measuring. We've been looking at the same numbers, but after these guys are done, we'll probably be using the same monitoring devices, but we need XYZ data on those things telling us
There's a
where they
professor from
sit.
ECU who will be helping monitor those levels and trying to really inform the town as to when and how much to pump.
Yeah, we've got a project by an ECU crowd in here that hopefully is going to give us a device to tell us when we have to pump. We'll come back to this, but before too many people leave, one of the things we talked about last November was another mitigating step that we need to take here for the overall East End problem is water running off of Highway 58, right down all 5 of those conduits right into the bowls that we've been talking about. So right now we have, or over the past year, we brought in NCDOT retrofit division out of Raleigh to see if they could help us figure out a way at all 5 streets to divert water right or left or east and west, right at the highway into those ditches. Unfortunately, for a reason I don't need to get into, they wouldn't support us. Just last night, the board approved a project, and Sonny's going to do this winter. Some of you received letters from us. We're going to pave all 5 roads from Highway 58 down to a certain point, and I'll read off those points, and we're going to put a crown on it, a 2% crown. Right now, those roads are either flat, or depending on how you look at it, some of them look like they cant a little bit one way, but if that's the case, it's not by design. We're going to put a 2% crown, which is NCDOT standard for crowning roads for runoff, and then Sonny is going to come out with his backhoe, and he can comb your hair with his backhoe. He's that skilled at artfully moving earth, and put about a 6-inch swale, 6 inches, mild enough that his 52-inch zero-turn lawnmower can negotiate that. So it's not a ditch, it's just a simple 6-inch swale, about how wide, 3 or 4 feet, you said? So 6 inches of depth over 3 or 4 feet. We're going to do that this winter.
And that's going to be on each side of the road?
Yes, ma'am. On Cedar Road, it'll be from the highway down to about the 106 street address area. On Holly Road, from the highway down to about the 105 street address area. and there's white marks on the road right now. If you live in this area, you want to see exactly where it is. From Willow Road down to about the 105, 106 Street address area, Yawl Pond down to the 108 Street address area, and Juniper's a lot shorter down to the 103 address area. It's essentially where the high ground from the highway, where it flattens out and stops. And the idea, and then Sonny's gonna, on the road, install crickets, not speed bumps, but crickets. They're gonna be about 2 inches of height and
6 inches wide.
6 inches wide, enough to divert that water coming down. What we wanna do is do it on the higher ground, not down in the bowl, but on the higher ground where we'll get infiltration into those. And so we'll start that this winter. So I want to make sure everyone's aware of that. We wrote letters to all the people that would have the land destroyed. It's all in town right away, by the way. We'll have to do all the locating and all that business, which Sonny does routinely with water stuff. I want to make sure everyone's aware of that. Anyway, we can go back to the bigger project that people were starting.
Hey, Brian?
Yes.
Originally, I thought we were going to start the construction for phase 2 this summer. Is it now being pushed off for another year?
Well, no, not another year. It'll be next fiscal year, which starts in July. But we won't do, the golf course won't let us do the project in the middle of golfing season. And I imagine most of the citizens will want us to wait. So I think it'll be about a year from now, Len.
Okay.
Off season. Next fiscal year starts 1 July 2020, ends June 21. We're not putting it off, we're just gonna avoid the summer season.
So you still see this plan can still evolve?
Yeah, I mean.
To some extent. The reason I say it is, I still don't quite understand what you're gonna do with Hester Woods, because Sonny will tell you, there's all kinds of dips and pockets, and that holds water, and I don't know how you're gonna capture it without having piping in it. But that's something else, that's something to be discussed.
Again, the pipe is going to go through Hester Woods at that northern area, and then it's gonna be right down the town right of way, and we own most of that property.
Right, that's kind of like the peripheral area of it. I'm thinking of it, the core, right through the middle, or, that's something to be discussed afterwards, but I'm just trying to say, there's a lot of water that's held in various pockets. Sonny, unless you think this is gonna solve, the
He was
saturation.
saying 30 yards, if it does 30 yards, it'll be good.
What's that?
He was saying it's gonna control 30 yards from the pipe, that's good. You know, that's 90 feet.
So if it will take care of all the water, I don't wanna see it standing water, and that's my concern.
Well, there certainly won't be more than there is now.
I wanna see none.
Okay, well,
I don't know about that.
we don't use the words none or all or anything like that. Because it's begging to be upstage. But the Hester Woods is a little different. You do, and in these ponds, it's the same way. You've had low areas that have been there for a long time.
Right.
And you've got a lot of organic material that is accumulated there in those soils, and so the water is going to tend to percolate out of there and move out of those areas slower than it would in those higher, sandier areas. And in some cases, the much sandier areas are only 2 or 3 feet away, but they're not where all that organics is. So and that's where in Hester Woods, sometimes it may be holding water because that's where the groundwater table is. As we lower that groundwater table, it will give that water someplace to go. Now, it can go down and it can move laterally over to where that pipe is. Now, how long that will take to thoroughly drain everything, I can't really say, but at least that water will have a place to go. Right now, that groundwater, you have no control over it. It just rises and it falls to where it's going to rise or fall, unless he goes to the big pond and he pumps out of the big pond and pumps the groundwater table down. Now, we'll be able to have some control over that groundwater table within a couple of feet.
So what I'm hearing is also the debris, the vegetation debris that is accumulated over the millennial is creating an issue. Is that something you're gonna do, is clean that out, get rid of all the stumps and vegetation so it actually help the water go down?
It is wetlands and it's subject to permitting action, so.
Yeah, I heard almost a year ago it wasn't classified as a wetland. Brian?
I'm not aware of any action since I've been here. You know, the people that classify is the U.S. Army Corps as wetlands. However, what they normally do is they hire engineering outfits to come in and do that. So we haven't classified Hester Woods. We haven't asked anyone to do it. We're hearing from these folks, it's wetland, Larry, but it's not classified that I know of by the U.S. Army Corps right now.
So that's something still to be determined about wetland or not. I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, if you have a lot of standing water, pockets, whatever, it's breeding grounds for all kinds of insects during the warm months. And that's one of the goals. Take care of a lot of the standing water that's throughout the East End. Well, that's one of the areas that would be nice to have addressed, you know, like more or less clean it up so there's no standing water as the norm. Make it the exception. And maybe you have to clean it up to get that way. So if we have to make a determination, if it's, I'm hearing point counterpoint, wetland, not a wetland. Maybe if it's deemed not a wetland, we can get it cleaned up.
It's a natural area.
I mean, is it a matter of just bringing backhoes in to kind of scrape out?
Where are our wetland lines as we come through here? Where might we get into trouble if we impacted these areas? And he flagged off some areas through Hester Woods, and most of those flags are gone. But we found a ridge that we could kind of go through there and not disturb what the Corps might consider as being wetlands. Now, if we don't do that disturbance, we don't really need to go to the Corps and say, okay, come look at this. And so, because we're working outside of their jurisdiction. However, if you want to call the cops and say, here, come into my house and tell me if anywhere in my house I'm breaking the law, you can do that, but it's better if you just avoid having those cops come in, because no telling, you know, that's their job, is to find something wrong. And so if we can avoid, if we don't do anything wrong, and we make sure that we're staying within the law, then there's no reason to bring the cops in and go through all the issues that might arise. Yes, sir.
So two points. I like this plan, and I think I disagree with the gentleman that left in terms of the ponds, because the ponds tend to have their own problems, particularly if we're not going to bring down the water table. So I like that. The only question I have is, you're creating the efficiencies here, and then we live on Laurel Court, so this doesn't impact us directly. And and Brian, we talked about continuing to pump out, preventive pump or something going to the ponds over there, right? We're still going to continue to do that, like the research.
Yeah, I mean, part of this project I didn't mention is that long discussed second line from the Reestone Bermuda Greens.
Right.
Now, there won't be any automatic pumps there. We see that. Sonny goes and parks his pump and pumps those down, and that's been largely successful. That preemptive pumping there, so there won't be any automatic pumps.
So the only concern, I guess, and I'm sure you've addressed this, is that the load on the back end of this, where you make that sand trap, will account for that happening as well, and to be able to take in that additional water that might come from that side of this.
Well, the load on the sand trap is going to be used during those routine or high water period times. When we are when we are, no kidding, getting ready for a storm event, and it's coming, and I've advised the regulatory agencies that we're gonna discharge, then we'll be discharging into the sand, and that sand trap won't be an infiltration chamber anymore. We'll likely be going over grass into the water, but, you know, we're due to get a hurricane, so it's not an issue.
This is the chart that the previous studies developed. And basically it's saying that okay, the golf course has got wells and they fill up these lakes and the groundwater is migrating out of there and it's migrating to the north and to the east and to the south, I mean to the west, south. And we're going to be pulling water out of this area and we're going to be putting it into the sand traps which are up here. And so this water that we put into that sand trap is going to flow straight out to there. And so that won't have any impact back on what's taking place here.
And the sand traps, by the way, are back here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They're way
Further
not
east.
on the map.
I'm sorry. But you got the same flow pattern. It is, the groundwater migrating from a high spot to a low spot there along the sound. So if we're discharging it back over into here, then that's way on the other side of anything we're having here.
I do think after every hurricane event, we're gonna have some sand trap restoration work.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah.
Second question, and I'm not directly impacted by this project as I'm on the north side of the ninth fairway. However, on the north side of the ninth fairway, there is a berm that, to your point, those wells on that golf course are then flowing into that low area of that berm. That low area of that berm is on the golf course's property. However, during heavy rain events, we have an issue where that water table rises so high that it then overflows onto our septic. And when I came home from Florence, almost into my downstairs, area. Two questions on this. Number one, do you feel that in that area, this is going to directly benefit my property?
Now, where is your property on here?
It's 18th fairway. So I can show you better. That's probably. So this is the ninth fairway, tee box. I'm right here.
Okay. I don't think that you would get any noticeable difference.
Okay. So the next question, and that's okay, because that's a situation where it might benefit me once every 50 years, let's say, right? But my next question is from a risk management perspective, we're talking about a man-made problem being fixed by a man-made solution that is highly man-powered and mechanized. So if we have a mechanical failure, and to this gentleman's point and to this conversation or over here, from a capacity standpoint, we're pulling water, right? And on here I can show, right? We're pulling water to this side of town to then pump it up here. What's the fail-safe over here, this large pump? What if the large pump doesn't work? What if Sonny's not around? What are we going to do from a risk management perspective to mitigate what could be creating a more catastrophic problem to other right now non-impacted areas?
I'll tell you, they're great, the what ifs are as limitless as your imagination.
Absolutely.
I hate stationary pumps because of experiences in my first career in the Marine Corps. I hate them. When you have stationary pumps, when you need them, they don't work unless they're maintained. We've got the best maintainer in the country right here. He's not going to live forever. I know, or work here forever.
He needs two more pumps too, is what he was talking earlier.
Yeah.
There's two more.
I get it. So
So that's
The
part
backup,
of
the
that.
backup, so we're gonna have backups.
Yeah.
The backup to that permanent pump, big pump, I call it a Hyde County pump that he's gonna put here, is him.
My pass.
So we're gonna have a backup to that
Yes.
permanent pump there with mobile pumps, 4 to 6 inch pumps, what we've been using now, back up to that. You're right, the entire system is mechanical. We've been using mechanical systems for 40 years, just mobile, and we'll still have the option, and I still maintain that in the worst of it, God bless if we have a Florence, we'll still probably be doing somewhat that you saw last year. But the benefit of this project, the benefit of the phase 2 on top of the phase 1 is that we'll be doing it preemptively and then mitigating. I mean, no question about it, but we're gonna have to have backup. The short answer to what you're saying is pumps and hoses.
Yeah.
Yeah, the short answer is pumps and hoses.
My question lies in, you know, to get flood insurance or not, because is the flood insurance gonna be, you know, I hear from a lot of folks. But, you know, more so, is the flood insurance needed because we're causing that problem?
Okay, let me, I can kind of answer that to some extent.
I get it.
Is that you've got the pipe system that comes out of the pond and goes out, and because I guess it was a permitting issue at the time, that those would be considered as detention ponds, the state required that that pipe be higher than the level of the pond that's there, so that water would have to build up in the pond, and then it would begin to spill into that outfall that goes out into the sound. Well, I think his experience has shown that by the time it builds up to that pipe level, that there's a lot of flooding going on that's not good. And so we will be putting in a pump down there. It will be an electrical pump, okay? It will have a plug that we can plug a generator into. So number one, you've got a pump that can operate when the power's on, and if the power goes off, you can plug a generator into it. And if the generator, for some reason, it doesn't work, you've still got that outflow pipe that's up there that will allow the water to go out. We're not going to be plugging that natural gravity connection out of there, so that we're not creating anything that would be worse than it is now. Worst case scenario, and all the pumps and everything, none of the pumps work, you're not going to be worse than you are now. And we've got generally two to three layers of backup. Yes, sir.
The pipe, Bill.
Yes.
The pipe that goes from Oakleaf to the Sound, from the very beginning, was meant to overcome the 14-inch issue across Oakleaf. That pipe, the bottom of that pipe is 5.5 inches below the road right now. Back in November of 2013-14, when it flooded out here at across 57 by Pine Knoll Boulevard, remember when we were trying to figure out where the pipe went to the canal, water was flowing, that man and I went down there, and water was flowing through that pipe at 7.5 inches, I believe. We measured, we went there and got our feet wet and measured. That is the limit, as long as that pipe works. Before we had that pipe, there was no limit as to how high that would rise until it got to the concrete wall going to Atlantic Beach. Now, at least when it gets to that pipe, it'll go, and I believe Florence, at some point, it was shooting out the other end of that pipe at 7 feet or so?
Awesome.
At 7 feet. So that's sort of the protective valve, the valve on the top of your pressure cooker.
Right.
Okay? Very honestly, no matter what people think, it was never meant to make everything dry.
If it worked, why did they have a pump there all the times pumping?
No, there was a reason. There is a
I
reason.
live there, I know.
I don't care whether you live there or not, from the design that I saw it when it was put in and was involved in that, Bill. I'm sorry, facts are facts. That's designed that way so it could be gravity flow at 5.5 inches below. Half of that pipe, that 24-inch pipe, down to the drop inlet in the golf course, maintains storage to slow the water coming out into the canal. That was an engineered design, not by these folks, by someone else. That was all by design. The pipe was there because expectations among many people was that the water wasn't flowing fast enough. Can we get it out faster? Yes, you can, by hook up a pump and make it go faster. And it did it.
He had me go down one time when they had the pump going. Called me up and said, would you go over and see how the water is flowing through the country club down to the sound? Am I right?
Well, what are you saying?
Could have been.
Yes, and I went over there, that's what the pump was running. The water wasn't even up.
Yeah, so but the reason you see the pump there so often, and I thought I had mentioned this, is we're now doing preemptive pumping. Okay, we're now pre-storm, we're putting it there 3 or 4 days.
Yes.
And then during every one of these storm events, and I read off some numbers at the November meeting, how many millions of gallons moved through that pipe to the sound during the storm. We simply didn't see any reason not to keep a pump there and augment it. I mean, once water's running through that pipe, we could have shut that pump down, but I didn't see any reason not to. We don't need that pump there to move water through that line. It has the fall, it does it naturally. I've got video of without any pumps. I've got video during the 14-15 of water flowing in and discharge. So it works, but there's no reason not to augment it with one of Sonny's pumps, and hopefully that'll go away when we have this large Hyde County pump there in future storms.
Yeah, the idea is that we will have this, again, it will be a primarily underground electric pump. So it'll be a lot quieter than what's been there.
Yeah.
And it will be able to draw those ponds down, and we haven't settled level yet. But we'll be able to draw those ponds down a couple of feet, and it can pump several times what Sonny's been able to pump through there, and without all the hoses and everything.
The other question I had, with all this pump you're gonna have to pump this water all the way down, are you having check valves in it, so when you pump, because you can't have a pitch going all that direction.
They'll be
Because
checked.
if not, you're gonna burn your pumps out pretty quick.
Well, when the pumps are operating, you won't have that issue because it will have enough pressure to overcome what's uphill. It's when you cut the pump off, it would want to backflow.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll have check valves on those pumps. That's standard.
Yes, yes.
Now, the big pump, no, we probably won't have a check valve there, but we're pumping up into an elevated gravity line where it would flow out and it won't be backflowing into the system. Any other anything at all?
It's not a question, it's just a suggestion for those that are here and also for the town itself. In the easements, I strongly suggest you have some language that prevents the planting of any willow trees or other vegetation that could adversely interfere. Put it in the agreement.
Yeah. And that
There's a certain distance away from it.
that can be done so that it warns everybody.
Yes. Preemptive. I think the most encouraging word I've heard, and what I've seen from Dorian also, is the preemptive and the lowering the water table. And that makes me feel a lot more comfortable about the whole situation, is that we're working before the fact and not just being reactive to these storms. And like Donnie was telling, we actually are connecting those ponds.
Yeah, and
We're saying the same thing as Donnie, we're just talking the routing of it.
Right, yeah.
we have to make use of those golf course ponds because they're massively infusing water in that water table.
And that ground can hold a substantial amount of water. So if it's there and we can do something, the groundwater pumps are cheap. They're cheap pumps and they're cheap to operate. You know, we're only talking about 1 or 2 horsepower pumps to be able to do that. That's very cheap. So if we can pull that groundwater table down and we can create that 2 or 3 feet of storage throughout the 30 acres, then we've created we've created Donnie's ponds that he wants. They're just underground. And so that's really the idea.
It was really encouraging to me to go out after Dorian, and I was expecting to see Myrtle Court like it was, and I was expecting to see, and it was all down.
I think he improved it. I mean, I think in Dorian, our water table was high. We got, you know, what I tell everyone is our flooding is caused by not only intensity, how much rain, but duration.
Right.
Okay? I always look at how long that rainfall event's gonna last and how much, of course. And we got a good dousing in 18 hours. But he created so much storage capacity in that Hester Woods, Yall Pond, Winfrey Pond area by 3 days of pump down. And if you were here, you saw we were pumping the Winfrey Pond dry pretty much. I think that kind of validated the creating capacity. All right, well, look, we'll break. We'll keep everyone informed of this. We'll keep everyone informed of this as we go on. I appreciate everyone's time, and if you're impacted by the line, your property that is, you'll be hearing from Sarah after the new year to get you a first draft of the easement. I want to thank everybody for coming.